Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 3, Episode 3 today. We challenge the myth of IQ supremacy and explore how emotional intelligence truly shapes a successful, meaningful life.
That's right. We're jumping straight into something that really challenges a core idea many of us grew up with.
This idea that being smart, in the traditional sense, high IQ, good grades, acing tests, is really the main driver of success and happiness.
Exactly. Is it the be-all and end-all? The sources we've pulled for this deep dive suggest there might be, well, a lot more to it.
Yeah, we're looking at some key writings that really push back against that long-held belief, the one that says your IQ score pretty much dictates your destiny.
They argue that while cognitive ability is, of course, important, it's far from the only factor, maybe not even the most significant factor in how our lives actually unfold.
So our mission today, diving into this material, is to really understand why the sources say just being academically smart. Well, it isn't enough.
What are these other crucial abilities?
We'll define this concept of emotional intelligence, explore what it looks like in practice, and see why cultivating it might be absolutely essential for navigating, well, the unpredictable ups and downs of life.
It's about exploring a richer picture of human capability.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The sources grab you right away with a really intense story. Picture this. Jason H., a straight-A sophomore, aiming for top colleges.
Right.
He gets an 80 a B on a physics quiz from his teacher, David Polagrudo, and he believes this single grade could derail his entire future.
It's hard to imagine that level of pressure or perception of pressure.
So Jason brings a butcher knife to school and stabs his teacher. He was later ruled temporarily insane, apparently even planning suicide over that grade.
It's a horrific incident, obviously, but it really highlights a central puzzle these sources are trying to tackle.
How can someone with such clear academic brilliance, someone we definitely label smart, act in such a completely irrational, destructive way?
And the sources are very clear on this point. Academic intelligence, the stuff measured by IQ, has surprisingly little connection to our emotional lives. A high IQ just doesn't give you a shield against unbridled passions and unruly impulses, as they put it.
And it's not just this one, dramatic example, is it?
Yeah.
The sources talk about something they call psychology's open secret.
Yes.
Which is that for all the emphasis we put on them, grades, IQ scores, even SATs, they turn out to be surprisingly poor predictors of overall success in life.
Yeah. I mean, sure, if your IQ is very low, your options might be limited, and a high IQ can open some doors.
But there are just huge, widespread exceptions everywhere you look.
That's absolutely key. The sources estimate that IQ contributes maybe 20% at best to what we think of as life success.
20%. That leaves a massive 80% influenced by other forces.
Exactly. Things like social class, sheer luck, but significantly other characteristics within the individual.
Right.
And even authors of books often seen as, championing IQ like the bell curve, they admit this. Yeah, they note that while, say, a low math score might mean you shouldn't aim to be a pure mathematician, it shouldn't stop someone from trying to run a business or become a senator. They actually confess the link between test scores and those big life achievements is, quote, dwarfed by the totality of other characteristics that he brings to life.
Wow, that's pretty counterintuitive considering how much pressure we put on tests and grades from day one. What kind of evidence do the sources offer for this?
Well, they cite several interesting studies. One followed Harvard students from the 1940s into middle age.
Okay, the best and brightest, supposedly.
You'd expect the top scorers to be the most successful, right? But the study found those with the highest college test scores weren't necessarily the most successful in their careers. And they didn't report higher life satisfaction or even have happier relationships necessarily.
That really challenges the conventional wisdom. What about people from different backgrounds? Does IQ matter more there?
Well, there was another study tracking 450 boys from Somerville, Massachusetts. Many were sons of immigrants from welfare families. They followed them into adulthood.
Okay.
And even in this group where you might think every point of IQ would really matter, IQ had very little correlation with how well they did in their jobs or their overall life outcomes.
Oh, what did matter?
Instead, it was abilities they showed as kids. Things like being able to handle frustrations, control their emotions, get along with others. That was what made the greater difference.
So it wasn't just about how smart they were on paper, but how they handled themselves and, well, other people.
Precisely. And maybe the most striking example the sources give is an ongoing study of Illinois high school valedictorians from the class of '81.
Okay, the absolute academic elite. top of the class.
Exactly. A decade after graduation, despite getting excellent college grades, they were, on average, doing no better than their peers who weren't valedictorians.
No better. Seriously.
Yeah. As one researcher put it, being a valedictorian means you're great at achievement as measured by grades. But it tells you, quote, nothing about how they react to the vicissitudes of life.
The vicissitudes of life. That phrase really captures it, doesn't it? The unexpected challenges, the opportunities, the emotional stuff. Life. So the big takeaway from this first part seems to be that our academic smarts, measured so narrowly by IQ, offer virtually no preparation for the turmoil or opportunity life's vicissitudes bring.
Right, and we've been so focused on that one narrow slice.
Yeah, ignoring these other vital traits, sometimes called character, I suppose, that are absolutely crucial for navigating our personal journeys.
Which brings us neatly to the concept these sources champion as addressing these crucial other characteristics.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence, or EI.
Right, EI.
And the initial definition provided is pretty broad. It includes abilities like motivating yourself, persisting even when things get frustrating,
Controlling impulses, delaying gratification.
regulating your moods, understanding others' empathy, and, importantly, maintaining hope.
Okay, so that's the umbrella term. This idea really got a boost with Howard Gardner and his theory of multiple intelligences, didn't it? He basically said the whole IQ is one thing, way of thinking was just too limited.
Exactly. Gardner fundamentally challenged that notion of a single fixed intelligence. He argued that standard IQ tests measure only a very narrow slice, primarily verbal and mathematical skills.
And human capability is much broader than that.
Much broader. He saw intelligence not just in the academic realm, but in other areas too.
Like what?
Well, Gardner mapped out a spectrum, including things like spatial intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, body smarts, musical intelligence, but especially relevant to our discussion are what he called the personal intelligences.
Ah, okay. And he split those personal intelligences into two main types.
Yes. First, there's interpersonal intelligence. That's the ability to understand other people, figuring out their motivations, how they operate, knowing how to work effectively with them.
Like good salespeople or teachers or leaders.
Exactly. Those are the examples the sources give. People often strong in that area.
And the other side of that coin.
That's intrapersonal intelligence. This is the capacity for deep self-knowledge, forming an accurate picture of who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, and using that understanding to operate effectively in the world.
So it's linked to things like finding inner contentment, making choices that actually align with your true feelings.
Precisely. Knowing yourself well enough to guide your life effectively.
The sources give that great little story about the 4-year-old girl, Judy, in the Project Spectrum program.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
On the surface, she seemed shy, maybe a bit withdrawn. But when they gave her a dollhouse model of her classroom,
She could map out exactly where every kid liked to play, who was friends with whom, who was kind of on the fringes. Amazing social awareness for a 4-year-old.
totally. That social perceptiveness is clearly a distinct talent, isn't it? It's a people skill that obviously has real value later in life in all sorts of careers and relationships.
It absolutely is. And Gardner's framework was consciously multiple, intentionally moving beyond that narrow IQ focus. He even broke down interpersonal intelligence further into specific skills.
Like leadership, building relationships.
Handling conflict, and that kind of social analysis Judy demonstrated.
Okay, so Gardner brings these personal intelligences into the conversation. But the sources note something interesting. Because his work came out of cognitive science, he tended to focus more on the thinking side of feelings.
Right, like thoughts about feelings, metacognition, rather than diving deep into the actual experience and power of the emotions themselves.
Which points to a bit of a historical blind spot in psychology, maybe.
You could say that. For decades, especially during the reign of behaviorism, the study of inner life, including emotions, was largely avoided, seen as unscientific, too messy.
Right, only observable behavior mattered.
Then came the cognitive revolution, which was great for understanding thought processes, information processing, but it often treated intelligence as this very cold processing system. Like Mr. Spock from Star Trek.
Ah, the Spock versus Data analogy they use. I love that. Spock is pure logic, famously suppressing emotion because it's illogical. But Data, the android on Star Trek, the next generation, he actively wants to feel. He realizes his cool logic fails to bring the right human solution sometimes.
Exactly. The sources argue that our feelings are where our humanity is most evident. Trying to model the mind without them, like using that computer metaphor cognitive science often leaned on, gives you an impoverished picture. Emotions, they say, enrich everything. They add depth, color, meaning.
So while Gardner identified these personal intelligences, someone needed to really dive into the intelligence within the emotions themselves, not just thinking about them.
Precisely. And that's where Yale psychologist Peter Salovey comes in. He built on Gardner's personal intelligences, but specifically focused on mapping out ways we can bring intelligence to our emotions.
Okay.
It's interesting, actually, that even early IQ pioneers like E.L. Thorndike back in the 1920s, he had a concept of social intelligence, the ability to understand others and act wisely in human relations.
But that got sidelined.
Yeah, it was later dismissed by other IQ theorists who were focused purely on academic, abstract intelligence. They thought it was too vague, maybe.
But modern psychologists like Robert Sternberg, also at Yale, and Salovey, they've kind of circled back to this broader view, haven't they?
They have. They see intelligence not just as academic smarts, but as, what it truly takes to lead a successful life, broadly defined.
And that perspective inevitably highlights the critical role of these personal or emotional intelligences.
Definitely. So Salovey refined and detailed these ideas, outlining 5 main domains of emotional intelligence. Think of them as a map of what EI actually looks like in practice.
Okay, let's walk through them. What's the first one?
The first is knowing one's emotions. This is self-awareness, basically, the ability to recognize a feeling as it's happening.
Just noticing it in the moment.
Exactly. The sources call it the keystone of emotional intelligence. It's fundamental for psychological insight, for self-understanding. If you can't notice your feelings, you're kind of at their mercy.
Yeah, just swept along by them.
But if you're clear about what you're feeling, it leads to much better decisions, whether it's about who to marry or what job to take. You have better data to work with.
Okay, so self-awareness is step 1. Foundational. What's next?
Building right on that is managing emotions. This is about handling your feelings appropriately once you recognize them.
So not letting them run wild.
Right. It includes being able to soothe yourself when you're upset, being able to shake off things like anxiety or pervasive gloom or irritability. Someone poor at this is constantly battling their internal state, just drained by it.
Whereas someone good at it.
They can bounce back quickly from setbacks and distress. Resilience.
That sounds incredibly important for just navigating daily life, let alone big challenges. What about using emotions in a more positive, forward-looking way?
That's the third domain. Motivating oneself. This is about marshaling your emotions, harnessing them to drive you toward a goal. It's essential for paying attention, for self-motivation, for mastering skills, and even for creativity. Emotional self-control, being able to delay gratification, resist impulsive urges, is absolutely key to achieving anything meaningful in the long run.
Like sticking with a difficult project.
Exactly. Or studying for an exam instead of going out. It's also linked to the ability to enter that state of deep focus people call flow.
Right, where you're totally absorbed.
And that state leads to higher productivity and satisfaction.
Okay, so we have understanding our own emotions, managing them, and using them for motivation. What about turning outward, understanding others?
That's the fourth domain, recognizing emotions in others. This is essentially empathy, and it builds on your own self-awareness. It's hard to read others if you can't read yourself.
Makes sense.
The sources describe this as the fundamental people skill. It's about picking up on subtle social cues, tone of voice, facial expression, body language to understand what others are feeling, what they need, or what they want.
That sounds crucial for so many things.
Absolutely. Professions like teaching, healthcare, sales, management, they rely heavily on it. And empathy is also what the sources say kindles altruism, our desire to help others.
And the final domain.
The fifth is handling relationships. This is described as the art of relationships, and it's really about managing emotions in other people, bringing all the other skills together in interaction.
So smoothing interactions, navigating social situations.
Exactly. It covers everything from social competence and grace to, well, social awkwardness. It's the foundation for things like popularity, leadership, and just being effective in your dealings with everyone around you.
And people who excel here.
The sources note they tend to do well at pretty much anything that relies on smooth interactions. They call them the social stars.
Wow. So that gives us a really detailed map, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of what this emotional intelligence actually looks like in terms of specific identifiable abilities.
Exactly. And it's important to clarify the relationship between this EI and traditional IQ. The sources really emphasize they are separate competencies.
Not opposites then.
No, not opposites at all. Someone can be strong in both, or weak in both, or have a mix, but they are largely independent entities. There's only a very slight correlation statistically.
So high IQ doesn't guarantee high EI and vice versa?
Precisely. And unlike IQ, there's no single simple paper and pencil test that captures all of EI. Some of these skills, like empathy or relationship management, are best seen in how people actually behave in real-world situations.
Okay, to really show the difference, the sources bring in this comparison from psychologist Jack Block. He looked at theoretical pure types, someone high in just IQ versus someone high in just emotional abilities.
Right, these are theoretical profiles, like ideal types. Nobody's purely one or the other, but they help illustrate what each dimension adds kind of independently.
So let's look at the pure high IQ type from Block's profiles first. Imagine someone where emotional factors aren't really their strong suit. The sources describe them as, adept intellectually, brilliant maybe, but often struggling in the personal world. For men, this type might be intellectually curious, ambitious, predictable, productive.
Sounds good so far.
But also tends to be critical, condescending, fastidious, inhibited, uneasy with sensuality or physical closeness, unexpressive, detached, and emotionally rather, bland or cold.
Ooh, a bit brittle, maybe.
And for women described in this high IQ, lower EI profile, they show intellectual confidence, fluent thinking, they value intellect highly, but might also be prone to introspection, anxiety, a lot of worrying or rumination, guilt, and hesitate to express anger directly, maybe holding it in.
Okay. So again, intellectually capable, but perhaps struggling with the inner emotional landscape and expressing it effectively.
Yeah, paints a picture of someone maybe very capable mentally, but perhaps a bit socially or emotionally challenging to connect with, or maybe just not very fulfilled personally.
Now, contrast that with the pure high emotional intelligence type, where academic IQ isn't the main defining feature.
All right, the other end of the spectrum, theoretically.
These individuals are described as socially poised, outgoing, cheerful. They're not prone to fearfulness or getting stuck in worry loops.
Sounds pleasant.
They have a notable capacity for commitment to people, to causes. They're responsible, have an ethical outlook, and are sympathetic and caring in their relationships.
That sounds like a much more well-rounded and engaging person.
Their emotional life is described as rich but appropriate, well-managed. They're comfortable with themselves, comfortable with others, comfortable in the social universe they inhabit.
And for women specifically in this high EI profile.
The profile mentions being assertive, expressing feelings directly but appropriately, having a positive self-image, feeling that life has meaning. They adapt well to stress, are comfortable reaching out to new people, can be playful, spontaneous, open to new experiences.
And the flip side of the high IQ anxiety.
They're rarely anxious, guilty, or stuck in those cycles of rumination.
Wow. Comparing those two theoretical pictures, side by side, it seems pretty clear which one describes someone better equipped to navigate the complexities of life, relationships, and frankly, find personal fulfillment.
The sources conclude that while we all have a blend of these cognitive and emotional strengths, emotional intelligence adds far more of the qualities that make us more fully human.
More fully human. I like that.
And here's the incredibly hopeful and I think critical point that comes through loud and clear from the sources. These emotional competencies, they were not fixed traits you're just born with, like eye color.
Unlike the way we often think about IQ, right, is something pretty stable.
Exactly. They explicitly state that these skills can indeed be learned and improved upon. The brain is remarkably plastic, meaning it can change and adapt throughout life based on experience and effort.
So lapses or weaknesses in emotional skills, they're not permanent.
No, they can be remedied. We can learn to be more self-aware, better at managing emotions, more empathetic.
That's huge. That changes everything, really. It means this isn't just about identifying who has these traits, but about recognizing that all of us, can actually develop them.
Precisely.
So, bringing it back to you listening right now, why should you care about all this? The sources make it really clear. Cultivating emotional intelligence gives you a significant added edge in pretty much every area of life.
Absolutely. They point out it's crucial in the workplace. Think teamwork, leadership, handling clients. It's vital for healthy relationships of all kinds, romantic partners, family, friendships. It helps you understand and navigate social dynamics much more effectively.
And just for your own well-being.
Fundamentally, yes. It contributes massively to your ability to be content and effective in your own skin, in your own life, and it helps you avoid those draining inner battles that sabotage ability for focused work and clear thought. Less internal static.
It sounds like the sources are arguing forcefully that our schools and maybe our broader culture have been far too narrow in focus.
Way too narrow, fixating almost exclusively on academic abilities, the traditional IQ side of things.
And in doing so, we've been ignoring, or at least failing to actively cultivate, this much broader, arguably more important range of talents, these emotional skills.
Exactly. It's about more than just getting good grades. Training children, and yes, even adults in these personal intelligences, is essential for dealing with the real, often messy realities of life itself.
So thinking back on our deep dive today, we started by questioning that long-held myth that IQ is everything. We looked at some compelling evidence from the sources showing its surprising limits.
Then we introduced the concept of emotional intelligence, Howard Gardner's broader view of human capabilities, and acknowledged how psychology's focus has shifted over time.
We then mapped out those 5 crucial domains of EI, thanks to Peter Salovey's work, really detailing what these skills actually look like in action.
And we saw through those theoretical profiles how profoundly different a life strong in emotional intelligence might be compared to one focused only on academic prowess, a richer life, arguably.
The clear message resonating through all these sources seems to be that emotional intelligence is a distinct, powerful, and, well, fundamental form of intelligence.
It's critical not just for traditional markers of success like career or income, but for achieving happiness, building meaningful connections, and effectively navigating the countless challenges and opportunities life inevitably presents.
And given that the sources are so emphatic that emotional intelligence is learnable, that it's something we can actively work on and improve throughout our lives.
And that it adds so much to those qualities that make us, as they put it, more fully human.
Here's something to ponder. How can you consciously focus on cultivating these specific emotional skills in your own life? Maybe even just picking 1 or 2 of Salovey's domains, self-awareness, maybe, or empathy to explore and practice.
And perhaps the even bigger question, how might our education systems finally shift? How can they start to truly value and actively teach this broader, richer spectrum of human capability instead of focusing so narrowly on that traditional academic band?
Lots to think about there. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope exploring these sources has given you a new perspective on what it truly means to be capable, successful, and resilient in the world.
Reflecting on these ideas yourself, seeing where they fit in your own experience, that can be a really powerful next step.